As you know, Clause 1 of the bill creates a duty on the Department of Health to provide free period products universally across Northern Ireland, and Clause 2 creates a duty to create regulations specifying public service bodies, and that specifically includes HSE trusts and HSE board. The Department of Health supports the objectives and the overall intent of this bill, and we think that the concept is very important. However, whilst we all can agree that the lack of access to period products can have significant health impacts, both physically and mentally, period products are not classified as healthcare products. This is as menstruation is neither an issue that generally requires health treatment, neither is it preventable. The lack of period products can cause health issues, also does not make it the underlying issue, in this case the lack of period products, a direct healthcare issue. Parallels can be drawn to other areas that cause health issues, such as social deprivation, fuel poverty, homelessness, which are all hugely important issues and hugely important for health inequalities and health outcomes. However, they're not health issues in themselves. So whilst the bill has very good intentions and will undoubtedly help those who need help, we believe it should be considered as an issue of gender equality, poverty, or social justice, not a healthcare issue. It is therefore the view of the department that a duty in Clause 1 should not be with the Department of Health. Again, that doesn't take away anything of the importance of the bill or how the good it will do. In the letter from Minister Swan to the committee, a number of comments were made in relation to specific clauses. I want to mention a few that we find particularly important. The general duty in Clause 1 and the more specific duty in Clause 2 includes a number of factors that have to be taken into account, such as dignity, accessibility, choice, and differently able people. The view of the department is that this is a very good way of expressing how products should be provided, and it's a pragmatic way to ensure products are available where they are needed. More specific requirements, such as requirements to have products available in toilet cubicles or specified areas, could be difficult to accommodate, considering the wide variety of locations where products would be provided. For example, from a purely healthcare perspective, in a mental health or learning disability hospital, regard must be had to patient safety, where the lack of understanding of the product may cause risks that need to be managed and that will be difficult to manage if available in all toilets. This is obviously not a problem available, for example, in further educational settings, so a differential approach is useful, and we fully support the aspect of dignity, accessibility and choice, and the need to consult on those things. We also want to note that Clause 2 provides a duty to create regulations to specify public service bodies with requirements of trust, the HSE board and educational settings. Firstly, we want to note the HSE board. This is not a public-facing body, and it's due to close on the 31st of March. So therefore, we believe the most prudent aspect would be to remove the HSE board. We're also a bit concerned over inclusion and absolute requirements relating to HSE trusts. As currently drafted, the requirements would include the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service HSE Trust, which we understand might not be intentional, which may cause some logistical challenges. We also don't necessarily see the difference between HSE Trust and other public-facing bodies, even in the Department of Health's remit. So the wide inclusion of all trusts might cause technical and administrative challenges. It's obviously possible to overcome these, but it might be more appropriate to treat the trusts as all other arm's length bodies in the department and the wider government, and not specifically mention them. They might provide better outcomes for the overall provisions. As we will noted in the written response, we have also some question on timelines, and we believe the overall timeline to commence this within 2 years is very much manageable, and we think other timelines should match those timelines. We also want to know that the commencement powers in Clause 9 probably should match the department has a duty in Clause 1. That will make the policy work and the implementation work more efficient and effective. I also want to mention the financial implications of this bill. It will have financial implications if enacted. It is very difficult to assess the total cost of the bill, as this will be heavily dependent on the price per product, the total uptake and delivery method. It is estimated that approximately 109 million products are used in Northern Ireland each year, so even a small variation in uptake and cost could therefore have significant cost consequences. Experience from other jurisdictions shows that the cost per product can be huge. With some areas, this is about 4p per product, up to 49p per product. depending mostly on how the products were procured, not on the products themselves. At 4p per product and a 5% uptake, the total cost of the products would therefore be about £200,000. This is obviously not a huge cost, but at 49p per product and a 20% uptake, the total cost would be about £10 million. This would pose significant challenges. The department believes that the most reasonable expectation in a public procurement across the whole of Northern Ireland would be about 9p per product and about 20% uptake. This would mean a product cost of approximately £2 million per year. This, of course, assumes we use low-cost products that are not reusable. With reusable products, costs would increase potentially significantly. In addition, there will need to be departmental staff to develop the overall policy and guidance. We will need procurement, and we will need logistical networks. There will need to be good distribution channels. If we use existing networks, for example, through community pharmacists, which is one of the few networks available to the Department of Health to get it across the whole of Northern Ireland, a very low estimate would be that this would cost at least £1 million per year. The total cost would therefore be at least £3 million per year, but with much uncertainty over the total implications. If the duty in Clause 1 remained with the Department of Health, this would mean that we would need to reduce other spend to fund this. This should be seen in the context of the very challenging financial situation, where the draft budget is not sufficient to cover the existing demands across the health social care system. As such, if implemented, it would therefore require sufficient funding to be provided, or other healthcare areas would have to be reduced. Again, the department supports the principle of this bill, although we believe that this powers or duty in Clause 1 should not be with the Department of Health. And with that, I want to thank for the opportunity to provide some opening remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks for that, Thomas. I must say from the outset that your genuine, wholesome apology for the lateness of your papers was entirely refreshing and fairly unique. So I'm not being facetious. I'm grateful for it. Your acknowledgement of the unacceptable status quo in relation to the lack of trade product provision is also important. But you've obviously then thereafter raised a couple of fundamental problems for the bill, particularly in relation to the Department of Health assessing that it is not its statutory duty to rule out the provisions of the bill as per Clause 1, which is obviously significant. And I presume members will maybe want to get into that with you in a bit more detail. I realise we're extremely tight for time today, so I'm keen to bring other members in straight away. But thank you for that clearly understand briefing, Dr. Adele. Really appreciate it. Might not agree with the substance in it and may need to challenge that, but really appreciate your presentation today. Can I bring in Deputy Chairperson Pat Sheehan, MLA, please?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Adele, for your presentation. I certainly agree with your comment that this is a gender equality issue. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And we have, in conversations with various witnesses who have appeared in front of the committee, the point has been well made that, no one would think of not placing toilet paper in toilets or charging for toilet paper or anything like that. And similarly, that should be the case with sanitary products, or period products. So I just wanted to drill down a bit into the costs that you mentioned during your presentation. And if I'm right, you're suggesting it could cost anywhere between 200,000 and £1 million. And you also mentioned a figure of 3 million. What was that in relation to?
The product cost we estimate between 200,000 and £10 million. Depending on the cost, we don't think it would be as high as £10 million, and that's a product cost alone. We think that a reasonable product cost would be in the region of £2 million if there's about a 20% uptake and 9 pence per product cost. And then there'll be other costs such as logistical and administrative cost that we estimate at least at £1 million a year. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty because it depends on the delivery methods and the logistical system and what the outcome of procurement exercise would be. But we think that's the best estimate we can take at this point.
And why is there such a wide differential in cost?
So when we looked at other jurisdictions and the cost that they've had in their procurement exercises, that it ranged from about 4p per product to 49p per product. That is a huge range. And the difficulty is because we haven't procured products at this scale or across Northern Ireland before on these, it's hard to know where in that range the cost would be. The best estimate we could come up with is around 9 pence per product, and the 20% uptake, we believe about 2 million cost per year for the products alone. And I mean,
sorry for interrupting you. In terms of your comparative analysis, what other jurisdictions were you looking at?
We were speaking extensively with Scotland.
Right.
And we're looking at also the cost of products in various pilots across England. But Scotland has also gone through procurement exercise quite recently, so that they have fairly good indication of what it might cost per product. And that there's a huge variation in Scotland.
Okay. Thanks for that. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Could I bring in Robin Newton, MLA, please? Sorry, Robin, you're on mute, and I just saw your text message there as well. Apologies.
I think, as previously, my concerns probably not the right word, really just seeking information around the potential budget, but indeed what has been asked by the deputy there, I think, is steering me in the right direction, and no doubt that will be information that will come out at a later stage. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witness this morning.
Thanks for that, Robin. Can I bring in Robbie Butler, MLA, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thomas, just want to echo the words of the Chair with regard to the refreshing opening statements that you made. Hope you weren't just prepping us and softening us up and trying to be the good guy, but listen, the submission is very honest, and we do appreciate that. And obviously, I think this committee would be agreed that this item and the very fact that you're up today would indicate that this should have been with the Committee for Health as opposed to the Committee for Education. Although we do have a part to play in it, and that's a given, because we obviously want to establish good legislation that sees particularly these products available and free to younger people, younger women, younger girls, and those who menstruate. So, with that in light, can we expand a little bit, Dr. Adele, about the gender equality and the poverty issue and the dignity issue? If we were to look at the bill and look at the parts that need to be changed or affected to redress or refocus the bill, because this really is a cross-departmental issue. Because when we look at gender equality and poverty issues and dignity, that's really a Department of Communities. When we look at the provision within schools, it's Department of Education. When we look at health facilities, it's obviously yourselves. So in terms of I mean, this is a bill that everybody wants to see through. I think the points that have been made by Pat, by the Chair, and then by Robin there are well made. In your estimation, and I know you're not a bill's expert, do you believe the bill has enough scope in it that could be addressed, that it could be more of a cross-departmental bill?
Yes, I mean, I think the bill is fairly well drafted, and it's not a bad bill in itself. The issue we have is the designation as Department of Health as the Department of Universal Power. If you have a universal duty on a department, then we need to sit with a specific department. Otherwise, it will cause too much confusion. The problem we have, and it's undoubtedly a cross-departmental issue, and there's undoubtedly that the Department of Health has a huge input into this. There's no question about that. We're not arguing with that. But the universal duty, if we would argue, should sit better with in relation to poverty or social justice, because that's really what the bill is tackling to do. It is not dealing with a healthcare issue, even though it has healthcare consequences, and that's a problem. If we wouldn't have been at the end of the mandate, my recommendations probably would have been that we should have taken a step back and sat down across government and figure out the best way of doing this. It would be unhelpful for me to say that to you now, because realistically we don't have time to do that.
Yes.
So I didn't do that, but that would have been my honest opinion. Would have been, let's take a step back, let's sit down and talk about this, where we can get the best result to take us through. But again, that's not realistic at this point.
Listen, I think that the deputy chair had picked up on this, and he was asking you in and around the financials and how you modelled it. I think that was actually very, very useful. It was something that we haven't been able to get to this stage with anybody that we've talked to. I think there's been a general gist that people were looking at costs in and around Scotland, but that breakdown of price per product is incredible. When you look at the variance between 4 pence and 49 pence, and obviously the difference between £200,000 a year and £10 million a year. I think that should sharpen our focus in the need to make sure that this is the cost burden is shared, and we know that the tremendous pressures that are going to come on health and education in particular are well versed. So just thank you for your presentation, and just a commitment there. It's nice to see a commitment from the Department of Health with regard to what you'll do, but I think we can certainly see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel with this, and you've helped flesh out maybe a bit of direction for the committee. So thank you, Dr. Dale. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Robbie. Dr. Dale, just before I bring in Justin McNulty, MLA, I expect that the committee will want to interrogate the assertion that this is not a healthcare issue. It'd be helpful if you could say more about that in the case that it is argued widely at times that menstruation is a public health and human rights issue. So can you, to anyone who would challenge your view that it is not, and that would put to you that this is a public health issue, can you respond to that in more detail, please?
Oh, of course. First, we want to say that the human rights aspect, I'm not disagreeing with. Human rights is an important issue across all departments, and something we all take very seriously. When it comes to public health and healthcare issues, the general position we take on products is that if a product is used for something that's not treatment and it's not preventable, it is not a healthcare issue. And there's a whole range of issues which are helpful and useful, which are not healthcare products. So, for example, food supplements are very useful for our well-being, but it's not a healthcare product. And there's also many things that causes healthcare issues, and most things in society impacts on our health. That doesn't make them healthcare issues themselves. And it is a very important distinction for us to draw, because otherwise we would arguably be responsible for everything in society. And whilst we want to be involved in those things, they would make the position of the department untenable. A good example is homelessness. Homelessness has huge consequences for both physical and mental health. And in my previous role in mental health in the department, I was heavily involved with the Department of Communities work on homelessness. And it's right that the Department of Health is involved in that work, but it's also right that we were not leading on that work. And we also know that social deprivation is one of the biggest reasons or causes of health inequalities. That doesn't mean social deprivation is a healthcare issue. It's a societal issue that needs to be taken forward through poverty strategies, through inclusion strategies, and similar. So in that sense, period product sits in that category as something that is important for health, but it's not a health issue itself. Okay, I think that's something that the committee will need to reflect on and I imagine potentially return to the Department of Health about. We'll consider this an open exchange with you in that regard. Can I bring in Justin McNulty, MLA, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Thomas. Is it Thomas? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Thomas, yes.
Thomas. Thomas, and thank you very much for your very informative presentation. Does your mind boggle, Thomas, that this legislation is only being brought forward in the year 2022?
I'm not sure it's right for me to make political comments, but I can say that free healthcare, free period products is a very important issue and would certainly have very good effects on our public, on those who need them, use them.
That was my next question. What do you see the positives of this bill, this legislation, as it stands?
Well, it would have huge. I mean, we all know the negative consequences of not having access to these products. I mean, the statistics around education and achievement is shocking. The impact on physical and mental health is huge. I mean, as I said before, I've been involved in mental health in the department for quite a few years, and I know that this is an issue that causes massive mental health issues. So undoubtedly, this is an issue that would have positive health consequences.
Excellent. I think the other questions I wanted to ask have already been asked, and very much in the corner of Pat in terms of the quality issue here. It's fantastic at long last that's been addressed. So, Doctor, thank you so much for your very detailed and informative presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Justin. Excuse me. Dr. Adele, obviously an extremely significant intervention, to say that the bill proposer's chosen department on which to place that duty of universal provision should not be the chosen department. Have you had any engagement with the bill proposer in that regard? I know you kind of, in terms of how to overcome that, you've suggested that substantive engagement, the like of which might not be possible at this stage of the mandate, would have been ideal. Have you had any engagement with the bill proposer at this stage?
I personally have not had that engagement. I was only brought into this bill at the start of this year, so I've only really had 2 weeks to look at this myself, and have had to focus on to get to the point to understand the bill and the consequences it would have. And unfortunately, I've not had a time to have the engagement that I would wish to have in normal circumstances.
Okay, has the department engaged with the bill proposer?
Not as far as I'm aware. I mean, as I'm sure, you're very aware of, the department is under some pressure at the moment. Okay. With most of our work focusing on the COVID response.
Okay. Can you recommend another department that on which that duty should be placed?
I apologise for answering in advance. I'm not sure that's right for me as a civil servant to recommend how the executive should operate, because that would have to be an executive agreement on which department should lead on this.
You must have an opinion, though, because you've identified that it's not the Department of Health, and you've suggested that the matter engages more closely with issues of social deprivation, gender equality, poverty, and social justice.
Yeah, and those topics are the responsibility of Department of Justice and Executive Office. So it's if it would be one of those issues, but that's where we believe it should sit in terms of policy. I must say, though, we do believe it is a cross-departmental issue, so there need to be cross-departmental working, but Department of Health is not right to have the lead to implement this.
Okay, and one would imagine that those issues would engage directly with the remit of the Department of Communities as well, though?
Well, Department of Communities is absolutely a huge part to play in this, absolutely. And
obviously Department of Education, given the significance for education institutions. I'm concerned. We started well, Dr. Adele, but I'm concerned. I have seen important provisions fall between the stools of cross-departmental cooperation too many times in my time in office, and I'm concerned today. Really concerned. Concerned for the proposer of the bill as well, and time is not our friend in terms of how we would overcome such a fundamental intervention today. I don't mean that in any way personally critical towards you, obviously, but it does stand that the department's assertion that the department that has been specified as being the responsible for the duty for the universal provision, not being the appropriate department, is extremely significant. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And I mean, I can only apologize for lateness in our response. And I wish I would have been able to bring this forward sooner. And as I said earlier on, if we had more time, this is something that we probably could have worked out without too much difficulties. With a bit of time for the department to sit down and have good conversations around this. It is difficult at the end of January to do that, both with the COVID pressures, but also with the quite large number of pieces of legislation that are going through assembly at the moment.
So not an insurmountable problem, but one that finds a time challenge. Are there? I know you touched on some of the other issues, but are there? You acknowledged plenty of positive aspects of the bill. Are there any other key problems that we need to face up in order to try and overcome, other than the specification of the Department of Health as having the statutory duty on the universal provision?
We mentioned a few technical things in the letter, but fundamentally, this is a fairly well drafted bill. It's not a bad bill at all. From a technical perspective, we like the fact that it gives wide freedoms on how we do this in practice, because that makes it workable. Tight controls over specifics would have made it very, very difficult.
Okay, well that's positive. Departments don't always advise us that private members' bills have been well drafted, so there's plenty of positives to work on there. Dr. Adele, I don't think I have anyone else to bring in at this stage. I'm really grateful for your engagement today. Maybe we can reflect on the contribution that you've made, and maybe reflect on how we help the bill proposer engage with you and the department as well, to see in what way this can be amended or refined, whether there's particular aspects of the bill that are more deliverable in advance of the end of the mandate than the ones that you've suggested may need more work at this stage. But is that you're happy for us to come back to you if necessary?
Of course. I mean, our job here is to support the department and support you to make the right decisions.
Okay, I think one can be clear that there is very, very clear consensus around the need for delivery of the purpose of the bill, the principles of the bill. So it's incumbent on all of us to work together to try and advance that as far as we absolutely can. And I think that's coming through clear from you today as well, Dr. Adele. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Thanks very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Clark, do you want to summarise any actions from that session? I think you might be on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I was muted after that huge sneeze. Yeah, I mean, that was very interesting. As you say, it's not clear whether this is, a healthcare matter or not. The Department of Health has obviously decided to take the decision that it is not a healthcare matter but a rights matter. But the witness did say that in his experience, period poverty causes massive mental health issues. So, I think that's worth, members considering.
Just to come in on that, sorry to cut across you. I think that's something for us to reflect on. I think there is. I don't think it should be read that all of the committee has accepted that it is not a health matter. It's certainly the intervention that's been made today, and something for us to reflect urgently on. Justin, you want to come in on that?
Sure, I find it quite incredible that opinion has come forth at this late stage of the bill's passage. The bill proposer very much contends that opinion, and feels strongly that should stay in health. I'm a bit perplexed that this opinion has come forth at this stage, and it's arguable. It's very much arguable that it should stay under the health banner. And yes, it is cross-cutting, but there is a view that it should be a health. fall
Yeah.
under health umbrella?
There's certainly a lot to suggest that it is a public health issue, but the fact remains that the Department of Health has today stated clearly that they do not believe that it is. So that is, regardless of our opinion, Justin, that's something that we're going to have to overcome potentially, and we'll have to set about how we do that. As I said in my engagement with Dr. Dell there, I'm really concerned that this is our first encounter with the dreaded "this is a cross-departmental issue," which really can be problematic for some issues at times. But hands to the wheel, Justin. Hands to the wheel. Let's get into these issues. Anyone else want to come in there before I bring Clark back in again? No, Evie, like you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point that it's cross-cutting is evident as well, and there is an issue for the executive here in deciding which minister is going to reply to the Assembly on this bill. I was initially advised that it was going to be the Department of Communities that would take the lead in coordinating, and they actually did not do that, and they said that it wasn't their role. So, I mean, there's some work going on at official level just to ascertain who will take the lead. I mean, from a human rights perspective, all policy in this jurisdiction should be equality impact assessed. And if a policy then is screened as showing an adverse impact against any of the Section 75 grounds in provision of equality of opportunity, that policy should be changed. So from that point of view, it could be argued that all of the departments are responsible for making sure that there's no equality impact that's adverse on people who menstruate in their provision of toilet facilities, hygiene facilities on the public estate. I do think there's a lot of support behind this bill as well, and the executive would do well to listen up to that. So I'll write again to Communities Chair and see what else we can do to get a steer on who's leading.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful suggestion, Clark. That is a good action to write to the executive and to ask for an urgent clarity as to which department will be responding. Regardless of whether they think they're responsible for a statutory duty for universal provision or not, someone needs to respond. I should say, it's my understanding that and I haven't had an opportunity to read it in detail, but the Lancet weekly peer-reviewed general medical journal, among the world's oldest and best-known general medical journals, has referred to menstrual health as a public health and human rights issue. So I don't think this has been bottomed out just yet. And I think a helpful action, Aileen, is definitely to write to the executive as the lead committee dealing with the bill, to request urgent clarity with regards to the executive's view on who will be responding, and whether there is an executive view as to which, if any, of the departments would have a statutory duty for the universal provision that is being proposed by the bill. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So the department does make a couple of technical points as well. For instance, that the lead department with the universal duty, the department who has the universal duty should also be the department which has the responsibility for commencing the bill. So there are a couple of technical points there as well that we'll speak to the bill clerk about later on in the meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members. I'll keep us moving then on to agenda item 3, if there's no further points on that.
Chair, you made a couple of useful statements towards the end when you were wrapping up. You said that these problems are not insurmountable, and they're not. And there were plenty of positives from that. I think when I'm looking into it, I mean, the plus side for this is that there's cross-party support that there needs to be a bill, that the provision needs to be made in all public spaces. And I think from my estimation is that the Department of Health, when you look at the bill and the front page of the bill and what's printed on it, the certainty seems to be in those premises that are named specifically. They're very much health-centred, HSC and so on. And there was a difficulty raised, for instance, that HSC includes sort of ambulance or paramedic stations and stuff. So therefore that's not appropriate because it's a workplace as opposed to a public space. What's not stated on it is specifically health centres and council-owned facilities. And it talks about education facilities, and I think that demonstrates the cross-departmental nature of it. I think it is just that lead. It's not a sidestep, I don't think. It's just an honest conversation that we're having now in terms of the owner of the bill type of thing. But what needs to be more explicit is where the fiscal burden lies, because I don't think there's a premises or any department who doesn't want to provide the product. I think that's well accepted, and I think the conversation is actually a good one as opposed to a negative one. I think it's speaking the truth, and let's get this done. And I know that, like the integrated education bill, the committee will work very hard to bring that through, Chair, and it'll be a good testament to you in your final term as well to get this.
No pressure. Thanks, Robbie.
No pressure.
Get this sorted, Chris. Thanks. Okay, members, keen to move on. Make sure we hear from our other presenters. If okay, yep. Okay. Agenda item 3 then, members, is our oral briefing from the Department of Education on the Period Products Free Provision Bill. Can I ask Broadcasting to remove members from the spotlight and to add our witnesses and refer members to a DE response to the call for evidence on the Period Products Free Provision Bill, page 26 of tabled papers? Can I welcome Dale Heaney, Head of Tackling Educational Disadvantage, and Ashley Mitford, Tackling Educational Disadvantage team. Can I advise our witnesses that the committee will give you up to 10 minutes to make a statement followed by questions. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the invitation to provide oral evidence on the Period Products Free Provision Bill. We can also provide an update on the progress of the pilot scheme to address period dignity in schools, if that would be helpful. You may be aware that the Minister of Education wrote to the bill sponsor on the 13th of December 2021 supporting the bill insofar as it relates to schools. The evidence we will provide today relates to provision of free period products in schools and statutory youth settings. The committee has been supportive of the pilot scheme to address period dignity in schools, which launched in September 2021. There is a clear correlation between school absence and median menstruation age. However, it is not straightforward to demonstrate through attendance figures alone that this is because pupils can't afford period products. In fact, there's a significant change in attendance patterns for girls at median menstruation age, regardless of free school meal entitlement. Addressing period poverty by making products available free of charge in schools, supported by curriculum materials, helps to overcome the toxic trio of period poverty, i.e. the cost of sanitary products, a lack of education about periods, and shame, stigma and taboo. Providing period products free of charge in an easily accessible, dignified way also normalises periods and has the potential to promote confident school attendance. Whilst the scheme is in its early stages, it has been extremely well received by pupils and teachers, with over 98% of survey respondents welcoming the scheme in a baseline survey conducted by SEA in June 2021. Taking the next step and making it a legal requirement to provide free period products in schools has the potential to further normalise periods, making the products freely available alongside other essential items in school toilets, for example. The duties that would apply in the school sector under the bill are broadly aligned to the arrangements DE is piloting in schools. The department and the specified bodies in the sector would therefore be in a good position to implement responsibilities if the bill is passed. There are some key differences, however, to bear in mind. The bill as drafted would make provision of free products whilst on the premises and not to take home or use elsewhere. This element of need would be covered by the universal scheme to be introduced by the Department of Health in Clause 1. Furthermore, it would appear that it is intended under the bill to make free period products available to school staff and visitors. Provision under the current DE pilot scheme is for pupils only. Statutory youth settings would be included, and these are not part of the current pilot scheme being run by DE. The Department of Education and the Education Authority may therefore be starting from a different position in terms of guidance and consultation for youth settings compared with schools. However, EA Youth Service has delivered a rated initiative, so would not be starting from scratch. We note that the explanatory and financial memorandum includes an estimated cost of provision for schools in the first year of approximately £2 million. This is not a figure that the Department can reconcile with information previously provided to the Assembly Research and Information Service. The ongoing annual figure of approximately £1 million is more aligned with projections made in relation to the scheme to address period dignity in schools. Based on information gathered during the early stages of the scheme, a figure in the region of 0.7 million per annum may be more realistic. It is also possible that this figure could be further revised downwards, depending on the scope and scale of the Department for Health's universal scheme proposed under Clause 1 of the bill. Chair, our written comments on Clauses 2 to 9 of the bill included some technical points, which we hope were helpful, albeit that this was not an exhaustive technical commentary on the bill. Our oral evidence today will focus on schools and youth settings. So if I can just touch on those individual clauses, if that's okay. Clause 2, provision of free period products, public service bodies. Under Clause 2.2, it appears that schools would be captured in the regulations as a specified public service body. It should be noted that as drafted, nursery schools would also be captured. Since the drafting of Clause 2.3 appears to include teachers, staff and visitors in a school, it is perhaps intentional that nursery schools have not been excluded, even though they will not have pupils of menstruating age. To reiterate, teachers, staff and school visitors are not included in the current pilot scheme to address period dignity in schools. So D suggests that clarity is needed where duties under the bill sit in relation to provision of period products, and that this duty should be placed on managers of each school type of school in Northern Ireland. D considers that Clause 2.3 should be restricted to persons with legitimate cause to be on the premises, given safeguarding issues in relation to schools. Clause 2.6 provides that the period products obtainable free of charge by a person are to be sufficient products to meet the person's needs while the person is in the premises. As we said earlier, the policy intention of the bill seems to be that the products that are made available in school are not for taking home or using elsewhere. If this is indeed the policy intention, then the cost of provision of free products in schools may reduce and transfer depending on the timing, scale and scope of the universal scheme to be introduced by the Department of Health under Clause 1. D agrees with the principle of consultation with public service bodies before specifying them in regulations. Under Clause 3, arrangements under Sections 1 and 2, particular requirements, the principles set out in Clause 3 of easy access, dignity, choice and publicised arrangements are aligned to guidance provided to schools under the DE pilot scheme and with practice in other parts of the UK. Case studies of best practice for schemes being delivered elsewhere are provided to schools, and a key consideration section includes guidance on consulting and engaging students, ordering, offering choice, practicalities around availability, ease of accessibility, protecting dignity, awareness raising and education. Under the current drafting, it could be construed that schools are a location open to the public when not in normal use, and that an obligation could be being placed on schools to make available period products to the general public at any time they are in use. It would be important that clarification be brought to this provision. In terms of Clause 4, guidance to schools has been developed in relation to the pilot scheme to address period dignity in schools. The Department will therefore be in a relatively good position to perform this duty should the bill be enacted. Under Clause 5, Statement on Arrangements, the approach aligns with our pilot scheme, which aims to have participating schools develop a period dignity policy in consultation with pupils. Under 5.7, individuals who may need to obtain period products in the future should also be consulted. It is worth considering, however, that the definition of pupil would include all age groups, even nursery. It would seem sensible to qualify what is meant by future in Clause 5.7, for example, in the next 2 years, and that pupils in years 6 and above should be consulted. The principle of consulting on the arrangements is important, and D agrees that the consultation should include the ways in which product users ought to be able to obtain period products free of charge, the locations in the specified public service body's premises in which period products ought to be obtainable free of charge, and about the types of period products which ought to be obtainable free of charge. So in closing, Clause 6, duty to publish information, D considers that the proposed duty under Clause 6 to publish a list of locations at which free period products are available would be relatively straightforward. As a minimum, this information could be published on the DE or EA website. Under Clause 7, key definitions, and Clause 8, interpretation. As I said earlier, we propose the inclusion of a definition of school managers in relation to duties under the bill. And under Clause 9, commencement, DE considers that 2 years is sufficient to prepare for this new law. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions that yourself or the committee may have.
Thanks very much indeed for looking to your written evidence today. Much appreciated. First question for me would be, why not include teachers, staff and visitors?
Well, we're not against that proposal. I think we simply wanted to highlight the fact that the scheme, the pilot scheme that we currently have in train, doesn't provide for that. So we were simply drawing comparisons between the two. And of course, cost would be a factor if staff were also to be accommodated. So our costs are based, of course, on pupil numbers. So it's just to highlight that, but it doesn't mean that we would object to it at all.
Okay. Why does the pilot scheme not include teachers, staff and visitors?
I suppose because the focus has been very much on how can we support pupils in managing their menstruation. It hasn't to date been about the staff that then support the pupils. So it was very much on children and young people. And that's invariably, I suppose, what education's focus tends to be.
I can hear teacher staff screaming in my ears right now. But you're open-minded to increase in that provision then. Okay, that's helpful, Dale. Thanks for that. Can I bring in Pat Shane, MLA, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, folks. I haven't any great number of questions. I suppose one of the discussions last week was around an educational component to this particular bill. One of the issues around menstruation is the stigma that's often attached to it, and the lack of education and knowledge among young boys in particular. And I'm just wondering what your view would be on incorporating some sort of educational component into this bill, so that children, I suppose particularly in primary school, but I suppose also post-primary, would receive education around menstruation as part of the curriculum, and that would help break down the stigma associated with menstruation. Well, what would your opinions be on that? Thanks.
Yes, Pat, we would be supportive of any initiative, including references clauses within the bill to encourage that happening. Again, in our own pilot scheme, we felt the education part of the delivery was very important, and that was certainly reflective of what good practice we saw in Scotland, England and Wales. So the two really go hand in hand. And certainly your point about educating boys as well as girls about the issues is central to the message that we've been trying to put out there to schools through SEA's development of curriculum materials. And that's complemented with the guidance on relationship and sexuality education part of the curriculum. So we've been keen to press home the need for all boys schools, for example, to have access to period products, because, for example, in post-primary school, some girls may be visiting there as part of their curriculum offer under the entitlement framework, and may need access to those products. But at the same time, boys also need to understand the issues that girls and women go through as part of their menstruation. So we see the message being, for both genders, and we hope that we're delivering that through our own pilot scheme. So if there's any feedback that we can provide to you on that particular aspect, again, happy to do that. and we will follow up with the subsequent survey that SIA launched last week. So happy to provide you with further updates.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you, Chair. That's me done.
Thanks, Pat. Can I bring in Robbie Butler, MLA, please? Then Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, guys. I've just got two questions, really. I don't know if you picked up on the presentation from Dr. Adele from the Department of Health, and there was some further, given us some further figures around potential costs. So obviously the pilot's been running for a while. What is the price per item, the average price per item? Have you got those figures so that we can make a more sort of Northern Ireland specific look at the provisions of the bill?
Yeah, I'll invite Ashley to respond to that, but I think we just need to be careful about the sensitivities over the contract that's currently in place. But Ashley, perhaps you'd like to say more.
Yes, obviously the costs for the pilot scheme are one contract for one project, and based on our volumes for our project, but certainly the range of individual prices is wide, but it's within what Dr. Adele had suggested. I can't share the individual unit price in this environment with you, unfortunately, because it is commercially sensitive, but based our latest projections to provide free period products in schools, if 30% of children were using it for all of their needs over 10 months, is 700,000 a year. And we can maybe be more help offline, perhaps. But yeah, there is a wide range of product costs out there. So we have 3 different types of product in the range. We have what we were initially referring to as value, but we refer to it as unbranded, and that will be at the lower end of the cost scale. And then we have the branded, the big brands that you would see advertised on TV, and you're paying for a marketing campaign there, but some learners are reassured by brand. And we also have environmentally friendly products which aren't reusable, they're plastic free. So the price per unit varies hugely. And
that's an issue. I suppose that's an issue that the committee have teased out, and I've teased out a number of times with regard to. So we need value for money, but we also need to ensure that the product is absolute. So in terms of forgetting about the price, we're looking at the quality of the product, and it would be really important that value for money isn't just a single driver. It needs to be, and I know I'm just saying this but I don't distrust anybody in this project to say that any item wasn't suitable for use. We can't be buying branded products just because they're a branded product. However, if the branded product fulfills a greater function, it's of superior quality, and it's maybe more hypoallergenic, or those issues too, that needs to be taken into consideration. Those figures, and I'm just going to offer my conjecture here. A 30% uptake sounds like Dragon's Den here. 30% uptake for use for school pupils in this project is looking at £700,000 per year, would indicate to me, and I understand the commercial sensitivities, that the average price per product is at the higher range of the scale that was, and you don't need to nod, we can talk about this offline. It's just that it's quite a high figure. Is there then, obviously, if this bill was to go forward, the procurement of it will be in the hands of the departments responsible for the provision. What's the scope do you think then, for cost savings? Because obviously there's going to be quite considerable contracts available.
I mean, I suppose the bigger the numbers, the more competition, and if you focus on prices can come, on the pure economics of it, will come down. Be my opinion on the economics of it. Absolutely. And just to go back to what you were saying there about the quality of products, so the unbranded version we have is manufactured by a company who also produce supermarket own brand. So these are still products of good quality, and they meet industry standards. They're not bargain basement shipped in and not meeting industry standards, so it doesn't have to be expensive, but it is just worth saying and I know that some other members of the committee were discussing the environmentally friendly products. So if you move to the plastic free range, they're a lot more expensive, and we just have to, and this is why, if we're still working out where the policy will go, that does impact upwards on the cost.
Well, I think the pilot project is incredibly important. It really, really is, because it's going to help evidence. Obviously, it's not going to be completed in time for the legislation. So these discussions are really important. With regard to stakeholder involvement, in this issue and around the quality of the product and the price and stuff. Was there any suggestions from stakeholders in the conversations with regard to the minimum levels of quality and average price?
No, I think the sense that we got, first of all, from our colleagues in Scotland, England and Wales, was that it was important to have a range of products available to accommodate different levels of need and uptake. So that was really our starting point in terms of what the contract might look like. But certainly there hasn't been any negative feedback in terms of concerns regarding the quality of the product. Schools have been getting on with the orders, and so far the responses have been extremely positive. So there's been no comment whatsoever regarding quality or lack of it.
And final one, guys, and forgive me because my memory's not great at times. And setting aside then the provision of the product, the other piece which is equally valuable is the education piece, and it's been talked about in terms of the knowledge and especially the stigma and taboo, and the fact that the education piece isn't just for women and girls and those who mentioned, but young men and young boys as well. Has that been identified within the project, and has there been any learning from that so far?
Yes, the education part has been central to the design of the programme, and for that reason we asked CA to take on the responsibility of building it into and reflecting the good practice that's already in the relationship and sexuality education guidance for schools. So there'll be references to issues associated with periods, and how the issue can be discussed with boys, for example, how it can be discussed with co-educational setting where boys and girls are in the same room, and so on. And the survey tries to tease out both the baseline survey and the survey that was just launched last week by SIA. The survey results will tease out if there are any particular concerns regarding the education, how it's being received. But the training so far is going well. There's been over 250 teachers have undertaken the training, and we expect that number to grow. So again, we're happy to feed back to the committee how that feedback is going once we get the second set of results.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that the 250 figure in a pilot is good, but obviously we've far more schools than that, so it's probably one teacher per 4 schools. And just finally on this, has there been anything then in this round with regard to the age that the knowledge impartation begins?
Well, it's the offer of training to teachers is both to primary, post-primary, and of course to special schools as well. So there's certainly no limit on who can attend, but the recommendation was that every school appointed one period dignity contact, and in larger schools there may be 2. So we're open to ensuring the message gets to as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me that time. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Robbie. Can I bring in Justin McNulty, MLA, please?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks, for your important evidence today. Just a small comment. Is it reasonable to use the term normalising periods? Surely there's nothing more normal in the world than a period for a girl or a woman.
Yes, I think we would agree with you on that. I suppose the evidence and feedback from schools and pupils is that pupils tend to be uncomfortable about talking about the reasons why they might be absent from school, so they don't generally say it's because I have my period or because they have having issues with their period. So I suppose the term normalisation encourages pupils and indeed teachers to be more open about discussing the issue and accepting that it's a normal part of bodily functions, and pupils and teachers should both be comfortable in discussing it. So the term wasn't meant to be received or interpreted negatively.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying. I just think it's we consider it in terms of there is nothing more normal than a period for a woman or a girl. So normalising, how do you normalise something that's normal? So that's my perspective on it. Yes, remove stigma, remove taboo is hugely important, but there's nothing more normal in the world than a period for a girl or woman. That's what I would think. The education piece, in terms of how important a role you feel that education is in terms of progress on this issue. What's your perspective?
Well, I think, as others have already commented, it's extremely important to ensure that goes hand in hand with the guidance that's issued and that the support that we're able to provide to schools. So we're very much relying on the SAE's professional associates and teachers to ensure that becomes part and parcel of the message. So SAE will continue to provide that level of support and education to schools as and when they need it. So although the training has only really begun in November, December time, that will continue throughout the pilot. And if the funding continues, which we hope it will, in future years, then the guidance we see being updated and kept up to date as the work unfolds. So we're really only just in the pilot year, but we expect the programme to continue. And if things need to change, if the message needs to change, then obviously we'll want to do that with SAE's professional help.
Okay, folks, listen, thank you very much for your efforts there. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Just a couple of final questions from myself then. In terms, the department has obviously done a fair amount of work in relation to free period product provision in schools due to the pilot scheme, and you've detailed experience of costs there. The Department of Health gave evidence in the previous session and had done some estimations in relation to costs as well. Have you worked with Dr. Adele in relation to potential costs?
We've certainly met with Thomas and with numerous other departmental colleagues to discuss the issue of period dignity and how it might impact on each of those departments. Obviously, the scope and perspective for the Department of Health is much wider and broader because it's the general population, whereas our focus has very much been on the pupils and so the children's population. So it's with those two perspectives being so different, there's probably not an awful lot of similarity in terms of what the costs might look like because the range is so different. But we've certainly shared with Thomas the costings that we have expected to see in the school rollout.
Okay, so departments are working together on this issue then? Absolutely.
We also have a four-country meeting periodically, and other departments from Northern Ireland join that discussion. So as well as having our own Northern Ireland specific group, we also have a cross-jurisdiction group as well.
Okay. And so in terms of the existing provision that the Department of Education has put in place, what additional provision would the bill require of the Department of Education?
Well, it certainly reinforces the work that we've done to date. It perhaps broadens it slightly if the bill is now intended to support teaching staff and support staff. So that would be different. And we would need to look again at what the costs might then entail. That may also require a look at the guidance again, if it's to be broader than just pupils. And of course, youth sector has done its own work in this area as well. So they may have to consider what the wider bill might entail. But I think we're in a pretty good place in terms of knowing what's required. And certainly, I think the ongoing support for pupils, if the money and budget can be secured, we're in a good place to see that continue.
Okay, so and do you see, would you be proposing amendments to the bill?
I think this is where the lack of a key department or lead department plays an important role. Normally we would share our suggestions for change with that lead department. So we're certainly happy to to do that when that new department has been appointed. And we've already shared some thoughts on what those potential amendments might look like, but they're relatively small in scale.
Okay. From an educational point of view?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I must say, I think the Department of Education is in a reasonably well prepared place to play its part in enacting the aspects of the bill that pertain to education. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think we are. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
No, I think that's a positive. I think it's worth acknowledging the positive there as well. I think it took a lot of work from a lot of people, but the pilot, the free period products provision pilot that is in place in the Department of Education, clearly puts you in a very good place to respond to the provisions of the bill. It sounds like it requires adjustments rather than a completely new framework. Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be fair.
Yeah. Okay. You may be aware that the Department of Health today has communicated that it does not consider itself to be the lead department and therefore responsible for the statutory duty for universal provision. Can you help us in any way in terms of how that might be overcome, or is that an executive matter?
I think I would probably agree with Thomas's view on that, in that it's probably not for us to try and find a solution to it, but we would certainly agree with Thomas's comments regarding this being a cross-cutting issue and cross-departmental with equality and human rights aspects to it. So that does give a fairly clear steer as to which department it might end up with.
If this is maybe a slightly unfair question, but and obviously the focus is on delivering the bill insofar as possible. But if for any reason there were difficulties in delivering the bill in its entirety, the provisions in the bill that pertain to education, notwithstanding some amendments, you would be confident that the Department of Education could deliver those provisions?
Well, I wouldn't want to commit to do something before seeing the detail of what that means. But certainly the Minister for Education was adamant that the Department of Education, for example, wouldn't be the appropriate place for leading on this particular bill, and giving its cross-departmental issues.
Fair maybe wasn't the right word. Not very well constructed is maybe better. I'll rephrase that. Are you comfortable delivering the aspects of this bill that pertain to education?
Implementing, yes.
Well, we're certainly comfortable with the progress we've made to date. The bill obviously needs some changes and some adjustments. We could continue to make good progress whether the bill is in place or not. But certainly we're in a good place to take on board any further changes that a bill on period dignity requires.
Okay. I think you sound reasonably comfortable. I know you can't say too much, but I really appreciate the briefing today, folks. I don't think of any other members to bring in at this stage. I think it's encouraging that the Department of Education is in a positive position and has made progress already in relation to free period product provision. I think it deserves credit for that. And I think from what I'm hearing today that the provisions of the bill that pertain to education can be worked on by the Department of Education. I think that there are bigger challenges in the bill for the wider executive and other departments, but as Education Committee, I think we can be positive about the fact that our corresponding department has progressed work on this issue, and as a result of the work of many people in that regard. So credit to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Clark, can I ask broadcasting to remove witnesses and to bring members back into the spotlight, and to ask you for any actions from that briefing?
Chair, yeah, as you say, the Department of Education's pilot is really in the zone of what the bill is proposing. So they have done a lot of relevant work. And
Evening, sorry to cut across you. If I could just remind members that they're back in the spotlight and that audible, and if they want to mute their devices, that might be wise. Thanks.
as have other areas of the executive, and there is coordination going on between departments. So it's just the logistics of actually the bill that is the stickler for us at the moment. But that's not to say that work hasn't been carried out. Ashley has been. We had a written answer from the Department of Education as well there to specific questions that I had put about their pilot and about the responsibilities under the bill, and that was helpful and gave an indication of what amendments the department might desire to see in the bill as it progresses. The Department of Health did similarly, so we can look at those with the bill clerks. And Ashley has given me a bit of an indication of which ones the sponsor and the committee, might need to take forward. Obviously, if there was a lead minister, then that lead minister would take amendments to the amending stages for all of the departments. If that doesn't emerge, I expect that individual ministers can table amendments. So that's where we are. Really, the actions to start to consider then with the bill clerks the proposed amendments, and to go back to the sponsor on any issues of clarification. For instance, the Department of Education, deliver a pilot at the moment that's for the benefit of pupils, but not teaching and other staff. So if it's the sponsor's provision, if it's the sponsor's intention that the bill should have wider application, then that's something that he can usefully clarify for us. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the pilot provision has obviously made some progress. I realise I neglected to ask the health official what amendments the Department of Health are considering, because as it stands, the Department of Health will have a statutory duty on universal provision. So one presumes that they will have to consider some type of response against that if it gets to that stage. So maybe that could be included in the correspondence, Evening, to ask the department what actions they're considering to give effect to their position that they ought not to have a statutory duty on universal provision. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have in their written
any amendments. Yeah.
Yeah, in their written submission, they've pointed to a couple of technical things. For instance, that the department with the universal, the responsibility for universal provision should also be the department that commences the bill. But yes, they didn't say that they were going to propose those amendments, because I expect that they're waiting for a lead department to emerge as DER.
I mean, the thing that we've experienced from dealing with other bills is that if you can have a position in relation to the bill will be enacted as it is if someone doesn't take action, amendment or otherwise, against it. So yeah, it'd be good to ask the Department of Health what actions they intend to take to give effect to that position, that they ought not to be the department with the statutory duty for universal provision, including what, if any, amendments they will be proposing, because our committee stage completes in a week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, just over a week.
Yeah, so consideration stage could be soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can emphasise that to the departments in our correspondence, then okay,
There, yes.
fair enough. Members, anything else you want to raise at that stage? No. Okay. Clark, our next agenda item is legal services briefing. I presume we have to go into closed session for that.
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Can I seek members' agreement to move to closed session for the briefing on legal advice on the Period Products Free Provision Bill? Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.